Hey everybody, this is Perch. I think there's a lesson in TV and movies that work well for comics, and I'll try and construct my point here. But this doesn't work quite well if you haven't watched some of these movies and you haven't had some of these experiences, and if you're not kind of in touch with some of these comics, and it's all gonna I don't know. I'll do my best, but we'll see what happens here. I was watching the Into the Spider-Verse film on the plane. You, God damn it, you can tell I'm old. I was watching the Into the Spider-Verse film. That simultaneously sounds old and douchey all in one. All right, so maybe we'll back up from that a little bit. I was watching the movie, streaming. I downloaded it to my personal device. Now this isn't better. Anyway, I was watching this movie, and the movie held my attention, played well. This is the second one, the one that ends in the cliffhanger. Spoilers. We're going to be doing a little bit of spoilers for that movie, by the way. Nothing major, but it's been a while. Like it was in the theater, it's on streaming, so I feel like the window is passed. But the film was engaging. There were a lot of familiar elements to it, and if you after the film you start to kind of sit and think about it and everything else, you realize that some of the things going on in that movie are a bit of a trick. The biggest part of the trick being kind of the flashy action and kind of the CGI and just how it was all put together, masked, some plot, not necessarily inconsistencies, but just silliness. And the interesting part about it is the movie doesn't need to be tight from a plot perspective. It needs to be entertaining. And I think the Into the Spider-Verse did this. It was entertaining. It did have some various kind of tense aspects to it. It had some stakes and tried to pay those stakes off. All of those elements were in this movie. And, this isn't the most amazing film you're going to watch all year by a mile, but it was good. It was solid. And a lot of what I've been saying about comics is that they always have to win awards. I don't know anyone, by the way, who at this point is still trying to go for an Eisner or any of those kinds of awards. They seem both preferential and stupid. But I don't know anybody who's desperately shooting for that. Even people who win it are like, oh, okay, that's nice. Does it come with cash? It does not. But it's you don't have to outsmart or outthink or any of that of your audience. It feels like writers today often feel like they're catering to Twitter, or they want a lot of likes on Twitter. They want a lot of recognition of being a clever artist, a clever writer. Leah Williams definitely strikes me as and has said things in the X Slack along these along these lines around really wanting to kind of be recognized for having this kind of book. And she's doing, she's doing a new series of Catwoman, Catwoman, Harley Quinn, and Poison Ivy. Is that the three? Or maybe it's somebody else. Maybe it's Black Canary. He's Black Canary, actually, are going on an adventure in Gotham with Studley ranch hands. And it's like, you're reading this saying, like, this is a Leah Williams book, and it's a book designed to be her style. And her approach. And the only good news in all this is the absolutely awful T.D. Howard Catwoman's getting paused while this is going on. So at least there's that. But these comics sometimes feel like they're written as an inside joke or to appear clever to other people, other writers or friends on social media, versus just telling a story. And I've described in the past as tell a dumb story. Just tell an entertaining, dumb story. You don't need to come up with the most epic twist, or you don't need to have the thing that nobody's ever seen before, because if you're watching Spider-Verse, if I was to break down the movie, it'd be like this. Miles is struggling to keep his secret identity safe. He feels increasingly isolated from his parents during the teenage years when many teenagers are feeling that way. He's trying to kind of get going with school, but he faces a new supervillain who is quirky, who he underestimates, and then gets massive powers beyond his imagination. In doing so, gets sucked into a multiversal adventure where we learn that certain bad things, namely loved ones getting killed, are part of a spider person's story. And if you disrupt that, if you save the people, it hurt. And in effect, once canon is hurt, then everything starts to collapse. The multiverse goes into hell. So a group of Spider-Men have joined together in some multiversal, city, ruled over or managed over or politely observed over by Miguel O'Hara, the Spider-Man 2099. And Miles, of course, is not thrilled with the idea of his dad dying in order to preserve canon, so breaks with their guidelines and goes off to save his family, and this creates chaos in the Spiderverse, and there you go. That's more or less the story. The movie, if you think about it, you're like, well, wait a minute, that why is it that somebody has to die exactly, and how does it know, and aren't there other ways to preserve this? And hell, you've got a billion Spider-Men, and you're sending 3 of them off to fight this multiversal threat, the Spot. Like the movie struggles, if you think about it, because by and large, a lot of the plots are both ones we've seen before. With great power comes great responsibility is the thread, and they're also dumb. Meaning, the Spot can't be stopped by a million people. We're only going to send 3 off. Like, this is dumb writing. But it creates action, it creates angst, and it is what it is. This movie will win awards based on the style and maybe the music, but definitely like the art direction and everything else. It won't win awards for, the most engaging, serious, thought-provoking plot of all time. And it seems like the filmmakers are comfortable with this. They're not bothered by this. They don't feel like they've got to legitimize what they're doing. But in comics, it does feel like that. And too often, I think in comics we talk about how the movies are, cheap versions of the comics, and that they don't go into depth and everything else. And yet you see a couple examples recently. The X-Men 97 cartoon is doing a better job of summarizing and creating tension to a lot of X-Men events than the comics themselves. And I'm saying this as a lifelong Chris Claremont fan. I love sitting and reading through all these things. And I definitely enjoy the detail and the nuance that was done there. But I also have to admit that in terms of kind of punchy, get to the point of the story, it's doing a decent job. Spider-Verse is doing it better. You like watching this movie because it's entertaining. Well, why should comics be any different? You should like reading this comic because it's entertaining. You should want to lean into it because it's fun. That's what this comic is meant to be, what it's supposed to be, and at times are. The best comics, if you really break down the comics you love the most, the action and the narration and the tension carried really, really well. Whether you're talking about a decompressed or deconstructed story like Watchmen, there was a tension and a power to that comic that carried it through. And this is something that a lot of modern comics are trying to do the opposite of. It's like, well, we really need to spend more time leaning into the supporting cast, or we need to really kind of examine the relationships of these characters, or we need to watch them eat, or any number of kind of silly things like that. It's fine when used sparingly, but look, if you're looking at the Spider-Verse movie, it's 2 hours, and you totally get the idea that Miles is crushing on Spider-Gwen, really wants to date her. Remember that, by the way, that social media controversy that the writers and the art directors were secretly trying to imply that Spider-Gwen was actually trans, because there were scenes where she was standing in front of blue and purple color schemes, which is sort of similar to the trans flag if you really kind of cross your eyes and lean into it a little bit. Do you guys remember that whole thing? Yeah. I'm sure in people's headcanon, they're holding on to the torch, nor will they will be happy until somebody at Marvel admits, yep, she's trans. Can they bully someone into making their headcanon reality? I don't know. That's a different video for another time. But regardless, my point is, you get the relationship of Miles and his family. You get the relationship between Miles' father and his mother, and how it's different between his father and his mother, and how there's a unique aspect to him. You get his relationship to Uncle Aaron and kind of how that has affected him. You get the fact that he's in love with Spider-Gwen, and maybe she loves him back, or maybe not, or maybe she's unclear about her feelings. There's also this Spider-Punk hobby guy out there that she seems to be into, but is she really? And what does she like about him? And she's kind of a rebel, and so is Spider-Punk. So is that a better relationship that have? And what does Miles think about that? And so these are all dynamics that are going on in this movie that in 2 hours is also kind of pushing the gas on action and giving you some very stylistic things to look at, filling you in on the multiverse and how all that goes, and everything else. So there's the movie is somehow magically able to accomplish both action and keeping you interested and keeping you engaged, and these elements of building the supporting cast and getting the relationships down and understanding what the character is thinking. It can be done. Now, at times, by the way, when I've made comparisons like this, someone will say, well, okay, so you're comparing a product that's intended to be $1 billion movie with a comic that's got to come out once a month, every month, and is that really fair? And the answer is, yeah. Yeah, it is fair, actually, because being able to tell a dumb, simple story that keeps the eye on the ball, makes the main thing in the comic, is not, like the lost art of the Covenant. I see what I did there? I said art instead of art. Anyway, it's not like it's the most impossible thing to do in the world. It can be done. And it's bad on, comics have kind of fooled themselves into thinking that, they've got to be more. And the reality is some of the comic movies that have done well and come out well focus on just providing action, leading into things that have already been done before. Oh, but there's one movie that comes out every couple of years. And again, comics have to come out every month. How are they supposed to sustain that? I don't know. Have an action sequence that carries 12 issues. You could do that. Not all action. But again, Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse was not all action. Please, again, don't get me wrong. I'm not holding this up as the most amazing movie of all time and the paragon of what everything should be, but there's some lessons in there. Just like there's some lessons in The Avengers, the original film, or some of the other films that have worked well. Civil War in that comic managed to convey some pretty reasonable things. Despite the Marvel quippy humor and other aspects of it, it still was able to do it. You can make art. You can dive in to details around things that are more than just, punching action and still keep people entertained and engaged. You don't have to lean fully into, whatever people trick themselves into this is. Anyway. All right. So that was my attempt at making a point. Did I do it? Let me know in the comments below. Do you have the same feelings? Does any of this make sense? Is this one area where you just need to tell the writers, hey, you could do it. You could do it. Something like that. I don't know. Thanks for listening.